Well, thank you everybody for joining Bay Area Older Adults Exploration of Almaden Quicksilver History Program. And this is in partnership with Valley Water. My name is Dr. Ann Ferguson, and I'm Executive Director of Bay Area Older Adults, which I'll call BAO for short. BAO is a nonprofit organization that improves the health and well-being of more than 42,000 adults age 50 plus each year. We trek on nature trails, learn about different cultures, explore historic sites, experience new culinary flavors, and help connect you to people with shared interests. Since 2013, we've taken more than 4,500 seniors who have walked more than 13,600 miles in more than 30 parks. Photos from some of our walks are shown here along with our website address. So for our first question, how many people have been to Almaden Quicksilver County Park and seen at least 2 of the mining ruins? So right now it looks about 50% of the folks on this call have seen at least 2 of the mining ruins. Almaden Quicksilver County Park was developed in 1978 and is more than 4,100 acres that includes the location of 7 separate former mercury or quicksilver mines with 45 miles of tunnels. The mines were in operation from 1847 to 1976, and nearly 84 million pounds of mercury were extracted and used to process ore during the gold rush. You can walk 5 miles of trails to see the remaining historic structures, including those at English Camp, St. George's Shaft, the 50-ton Mine Hill Rotary furnace shown here, the chimney that released sulfuric gases during the mercury extraction process, Spanish Town, San Cristobal Tunnel, shown here, Powder House, April Tunnel Trestle, and the Buena Vista Shaft. The highest point in the park is over 1,700 feet, and its grounds include Guadalupe Reservoir, shown here. Next question for you. Do you know how Almaden Quicksilver County Park got its name? The choices are, it was named after a politician named Almaden, it was named after a mercury mine in Almaden, Spain, the man who discovered mercury, or none of the above. So it looks like almost everybody chose answer B, a mercury mine in Almaden, Spain. A few people chose none of the above. And the way Almaden Quicksilver County Park got its name was that it was named after a mercury mine established in medieval Islamic Spain, and the word Almaden means mine in Arabic. As we will learn in our park tour, the Native Americans found a bright red rock called cinnabar in the hills of this area. This mineral consists of mercury sulfide, which is 75% mercury and 25% sulfur. It was the starting material for mercury miners. First, the rock was crushed into smaller pieces. Then heat was applied to the rock in the presence of oxygen, which forms sulfur dioxide and mercury gases. The mercury vapor was captured and cooled using water. The sulfur gas rose up into smokestacks to be exhausted into the air. When sulfide-bearing ore and the vast quantities of crushed waste rock from mining are exposed to air and water, a chemical reaction among sulfides, air, and water creates sulfuric acid. Do you remember whether sulfuric acid is a strong or weak acid? Please go to your polling tab and make your choice. So everyone is correct. Sulfuric acid is a strong acid. It has pH 2.75. It's used in car batteries and is one of the primary constituents of acid rain, and it's toxic to most living organisms. As I mentioned, when the crushed sulfide waste rock is exposed to air and water, it creates sulfuric acid. Preventing waste rock's exposure to air and water is virtually impossible. The sulfuric acid seeped into nearby groundwater, streams, and lakes as acid mine drainage, or AMD. Not only does this strong and corrosive acid contamination directly destroy soil and water habitats for plants, fish, birds, and animals, but it releases toxic heavy metals such as copper, nickel, manganese, arsenic, and lead into the environment. AMD is a worldwide problem, leading to ecological destruction in watersheds and the contamination of human water resources by sulfuric acid and toxic heavy metals. AMD can be many times more acidic than acid rain and battery acid, and continue for hundreds or thousands of years until the available sulfide minerals are exhausted. The Environmental Protection Agency estimates that headwater streams in 40% of Western watersheds are polluted by mining. A scientific review of 25 modern Western mines found that more than 3/4 resulted in water contamination. Overall, the EPA has estimated that it will cost between $20 and $54 billion to clean up abandoned mine sites. Another important negative effect of mining is mercury pollution of the air, water, and soil. It is estimated that 17 of the 84 million pounds of mercury produced by New Almaden mining were left in the environment. Mining led to mercury water pollution of the Guadalupe River and all of its connected waterways. This slide shows a list of all the creeks and reservoirs connected to the Guadalupe watershed and an image of how some of the waterways are connected. Eventually, the waterways dump into San Francisco Bay. The mercury water contamination was proven in 2002 by scientists who conducted a widespread sampling of mercury in the bay. They found a lot of the mercury in San Francisco Bay estuary originated from New Almaden. The reason why this is important is that mercury is a toxic heavy metal, a neurotoxin that accumulates to concentrations of concern in our San Francisco Bay food web. Bioaccumulation is the buildup of mercury in living organisms. It increases in concentration as it moves up the food chain from algae and zooplankton to prey fish and to predator fish. As an example, concentrations in fish can be millions of times higher than in the water in which they live. It's also concentrated in fish-eating birds and mammals. This leads to decreased survival at all levels of the food chain and thus decreases biodiversity. As an example, if the concentration of mercury is 1 in the water, its concentration increases to 100,000 for phytoplankton and 10 million for fish, birds, and humans. Moreover, in the oxygen-depleted depths of the watershed, bacteria convert inorganic mercury to organic methylmercury in a process called methylation. Methylmercury is 6 times more easily absorbed than inorganic mercury. Methylmercury binds with proteins in plants and animals, which can be fatal. Studies showed mercury from the mine was killing bird embryos and fish hatchlings. Another negative effect of mining was that erosion from digging mine shafts transported debris into the Guadalupe River and the bay. The increased sediment can block light required for plant and algae growth that fish feed on, clog fish gills, and make it harder for predators to see the fish they like to eat. Mercury pollution is the reason both San Francisco Bay and the Guadalupe River was added to the state of California's list of impaired water bodies in compliance with the Clean Water Act. Still today, the Guadalupe River system is listed as impaired and is a large pathway of mercury to San Francisco Bay. Some of you may remember during the big storm of January 2017, there were massive flows of mercury in the river. Specifically, the storm transported an estimated 70 kilograms of mercury to the bay. Santa Clara County bought the mines in 1976 and ended mining operations. The state listed the area as a Superfund cleanup site. During the 1980s and 90s, Santa Clara County paid more than $6 million to clean up many of the former ore reduction and processing areas around New Almaden's historic mining district to concentrations suitable for reducing the risk of direct human exposure to mining waste during recreational use. In 1999, the county opened up the area as a park. So now that we learned a little about how mercury mines affected the environment, let's take a 2-question quiz. The first question is, what were the toxic waste products produced from mercury mining operations? So please go to your polling tab and make your choice. And when you're finished, click on the YouTube streaming tab to go back to streaming. All right, so the answer is mercury and sulfuric acid were the toxic waste products produced from mercury mining operations. The second question is, what were the effects of mercury mining on the environment? Please go to your polling tab and make your choice. All right, so the answer is all of the above. So all three of those answers is correct. Now we're going to take a tour of Almaden Quicksilver County Park. We will learn about the history of the park from the mid-1800s onward and geology that led to its importance in history. Our guide is mining and mineralogy specialist Michael Cox. He explored the mines as a teenager and became a geologist who was part of the team who cleaned up the park so it could be safely opened to the public.
Hello, my name is Michael Cox and welcome to New Almaden. I'm a retired geologist. When I was in high school in 1974, I discovered this place called New Almaden and became obsessed with it. And I've been fortunate to be involved with New Almaden, the mines and the park continuously since 1974. In 1845, Captain Andres Castillero, a diplomat to Alta California and a captain in the Mexican cavalry, was sent north to buy out John Augustus Sutter and Sutter's fort. The Mexican government was worried about the European colony that Sutter was creating. Castillero was authorized to pay John Sutter $100,000 if he would agree to leave California. Sutter would not agree to leave. When Castillero came north to begin the negotiations, he stopped at Mission Santa Clara to see his good friend, Padre Real, who was the administrator of the mission. Padre Real warmly received Castillero, and while Castillero was there, he observed that the local indigenous people, the Costanoan Indians, were grinding up cinnabar and making red paint, vermilion paint, to paint decorations inside the mission church. He knew that this red rock might be valuable, but he wasn't sure of its identity, and so he asked the local Indians to guide him out and show him where they were getting the red rock. They brought him out here to this very spot, and this creek behind me called Deep Gulch Creek today. The native peoples showed him that they would walk this creek and find these rounded nuggets of cinnabar, mercuric sulfide. They didn't know it was mercuric sulfide, they just knew that it was red and heavy, and when they ground it up, it made a beautiful orange-red paint. Castillero suspected that this might be a valuable ore of silver, and so he immediately went to the alcalde of San Jose and he filed a denouncement saying that he had discovered a vein of silver and an alloy of gold in this spot. The indigenous people took him a mile up into the hills and they showed him rocks that had veins of cinnabar that were eroding out of the hills. Castillero then went on to Sutter's fort. He was not successful in his negotiations. He returned to San Jose very quickly. And in November, he filed an amended denouncement. He said that in addition to a vein of silver and an alloy of gold, he had also found mercury. He was awarded possession of his discovery on December 30th, 1845. And he named his newfound discovery La Mina de Santa Clara. Costillero returned to Mexico to raise money and supplies, and while he was there, the U.S. declared war on Mexico, and Costillero was not able to return. He sold his mine to an English firm doing business in Tepic, Mexico, called Bolton, Barron and Forbes. And Bolton, Barron and Forbes acquired the mine and very quickly developed the mine, starting in 1846. We're very fortunate that this mine is very, very well documented, and there are many repositories of mining records in the United States and around the world, and we know a great deal about its history. One of the really amazing things is that in 1847, the grandson of Paul Revere visited this mine, and he made a sketch, and in this sketch he drew the primitive furnaces that they were using to roast the cinnabar ore. Cinnabar is 84% mercury and 16% sulfur, and it's very easy to get the mercury out of the ore. You just need to heat it up. But you don't want to do this yourself, because when you heat this ore, it liberates mercury vapor, and mercury vapor is quite toxic if you breathe it. But for the miners, they would heat the ore in a sealed vessel called a retort, and the retort would trap the mercury vapor and allow it to cool back to room temperature and return to its liquid metal form. This mercury was critical for the recovery of gold and silver. Costillero knew that Mexico had offered a reward to anyone that could find a valuable mercury mine in Mexico or one of its possessions. Sadly, Costillero never received his prize, and Barron and Forbes and Company took over the mine and quickly developed it. As we know, the U.S. won the war with Mexico. California became a possession and then a state. And Barron, Forbes and Company faced 13 years of expensive litigation as Eastern business interests attempted to wrest the mine from their control, finally succeeding in 1863 and forcing Barron and Forbes to sell out. Behind me, on this 10-acre site, in the 1800s existed a massive industrial complex for the recovery of mercury. New Almaden's discovery preceded the announcement of the discovery of gold in California. And New Almaden was well positioned to supply all of the mercury needed by the gold rush miners in order to recover gold from their ore. In that sense, it was very important to the financial history of the United States. The only thing left of the once mighty furnaces that existed on this site is a lone brick chimney up on the hillside. Because the mercury ore contains sulfur, the sulfur dioxide gas, which is brown and smells like rotten eggs, it's smog, is not something that you want hanging around in your little valley where you're living. So they built chimneys up on the hill to carry away the air pollution so that it was a little more breathable down here in the hacienda where people lived and worked. We are now at Wood Road entrance to Almaden Quicksilver County Park. It's called Wood Road, W-O-O-D. It's not called Woods Road. It is called Wood Road because the trail that we'll be walking on today was a dirt track used to transport lumber down to the hacienda furnace yard. The mining company owned about 10,000 acres of land, and much of that land was stripped of its oak trees because the mighty mercury ore processing furnaces at the hacienda burned oak cordwood for fuel. There's a picture on this sign of a pile of hundreds of cords of oak wood piled up in the hacienda furnace yard. The furnace yard easily consumed hundreds of cords of wood a month, and that yard operated continuously from about 1852 until it finally ceased operation in 1916. People used to visit the hills here and comment that the mercury vapor had killed all the trees, but they were mistaken. If they had looked closely, they would have seen all the stumps. What killed the trees is the trees were cut down for firewood. There was an exception to this, and we'll see this today as we're walking. If a miner or a woodcutter, a stone quarrier, a mining company worker had a cabin in the trees, the woodcutters would leave those oak trees for shade. And so today in the park, everywhere that you see a very old oak tree, a very large oak tree, it's almost a certainty that there was a cabin located under that tree. We're walking on Wood Road, and we're overlooking the Sierra Azul Mountains, the Blue Mountains. They're called that because from a distance they appear to have a blue color. Halfway up Bald Peak, just a little bit southwest of me here, there's some beautiful trees that are turning golden color in the fall. That marks the site of a spring. New Almaden is just 12 miles south of downtown San Jose. But in the 1840s, when it was founded, 12 miles was a long way. It would be a day's ride back and forth. So this really was like a wilderness. And one of the big problems in semi-arid California is water. Those trees mark a spring to which the mining company built a wooden redwood pipeline over 4.5 miles long to carry that spring water across the deep canyon all the way up to the mining camps that we'll be visiting where the miners lived. Another spring located further to the north had a 6.5 mile long pipeline. These were made like a wooden barrel, a bottomless wooden barrel with wooden staves, 2 staves thick, made in a cylinder with wire hoops every 12 inches to hold the swelling wood. They were very effective pipelines, especially because down there in the bottom of that canyon, the pressure in that pipeline was about 230 psi due to the very deep canyon and the water sinking down to the bottom of the U and then having to rise back up to climb the hill. We're still on Wood Road, and we're heading for Mine Hill, which is behind me. We're walking to the Mine Hill Rotary Furnace, which was the last operating furnace at the new Almaden mines. I mentioned earlier that the Hacienda furnace yard shut down in 1916. From 1916 until 1924, ore furnacing was done at the Senator mine, about 6 miles to the north of us. In World War II, a furnace was built on Mine Hill. This was the first time a large furnace plant was put at the location of the mine. It was built in 1940 by the New Almaden Corporation, and it operated from November 1940 until November 1945. It roasted approximately 300,000 tons of ore, from which 5,300 flasks of mercury were recovered. Behind us are the remains of that rotary furnace. Although the mining company removed its 100-ton per day furnace tube, in 1956, long after the 1945 cessation of operations, a fellow named Andy Camilleri, the owner of Camilleri's Pet Shop on First Street in San Jose, bankrolled some miners and built a new 30-ton per day rotary furnace in the old World War II building. That furnace operated from about 1956 until November 1975, when Mine Hill was acquired by the County of Santa Clara for open space. Behind me are the ruins of the furnace plant between the power lines, and below that furnace is a dump of about 600,000 tons of burnt mercury ore. To the left of the old furnace plant is a green rock called serpentinite. That's an open cut called the San Francisco Open Cut, where the miners used heavy equipment to gouge out Mine Hill and roast the rock that they dug up in the Mine Hill rotary furnace. Hi, we're back, and we're in the San Francisco Open Cut. We're standing on about 80 feet of mine waste that's been interred in the open cut and capped. And we're looking out over the site of Englishtown and the last furnace plant to operate at New Almaden, the Mine Hill Rotary Furnace, a plant that was built in 1940 and operated until 1945, and then was rehabilitated in 1956 and operated until the fall of 1975. Juxtaposed here is the modern world, and behind the rotary furnace plant, to the left and to the background, is the old world, the original mining camp for the New Almaden mines. As I mentioned, in 1845, when the mine was formally denounced by Andres Castillero, this was a very remote location. It did not have water. It was very arid, and so the mine development was very tenuous. Mexican mineros were recruited from Sonora, Mexico. Others came from as far as South America, and there were about 7 different countries represented in the early history of the mine. These mineros built their cabins on these grassy, wind-swept slopes to the background here surrounding the Mine Hill Rotary Furnace. Eventually, in the 1860s, these camps would become very well-established mining towns, and by the 1870s, the mining company operating here had schoolhouses, churches, entertainment halls, libraries. The camp was a very stable and peaceful place, a good place to raise a family, and many miners wanted to work here because it wasn't as lawless and as rough and tumble as some of the gold camps up in the Sierra Nevada. These camps were active until the rich ore that they were mining underground ran out. This began to occur in the 1890s. The miners were having to dig deeper and deeper to look for mercury ore. They were using hand drilling, they were using black gunpowder for explosive, and they were using candles for light. It was very difficult work. Also, because of the serpentinite rock being slippery and soft, the mine was frequently caving in. There was copious amounts of carbon dioxide gas. It was becoming increasingly dangerous. The mine manager famously wrote to the New York office that the men did not have the tools to conquer a mountain in such a mood. The halcyon days of the mine, from about 1854 until about 1890, were really pretty happy days. There was a lot of rich ore. Miners were making good money. It was a good place. After about 1868, 1863, things started to change here, and the mining camp became a much more lawful, safer place. So after 1870, this was a place people really wanted to live. And they had this very good run for about 20 years. But with mining, sooner or later, the ore becomes so low grade that you cannot process it and make enough money to sustain the operation. After 1890, Mine Hill began to dwindle away. At one time in the 1870s, 10% of the population of Santa Clara County lived here and worked here. This was the IBM, the Hewlett-Packard, the Apple, the Google of its day. This was a really big enterprise. Even our newspaper, the San Jose Mercury News, used to be called the San Jose Mercury and News. Everything revolved around New Almaden. It was a real financial powerhouse in an agricultural valley. Because the miners worked 12 hours a day underground, 6 days a week, the families would listen to the cacophony of the mine. The mine was a noisy place. There were shaft houses and dumps and ore cars and mine tips and lots of noise, steam engines and whistles and bells and racket. And every now and then, for some reason, something would happen and the shaft house would shut off. Either a cave-in occurred or they ran out of some critical commodity, and everyone would come out of their house. This was a poignant time because there were dwindling numbers of people, and you can imagine them walking out of the hundreds of cabins on this flat, walking into the town plaza and looking toward the mine. Why is the mine quiet? Is this it? Is this the last day? Did management give the order? Are we shut down? Are we cast to the wind like gypsies? And then if the shaft started again, they would breathe a sigh of relief and go back to their daily lives. This touch and go characterized the mining operation from 1890 until 1916, when that faithful day finally came and the company said, that's it, shut off all the pumps, abandon all the buildings, everyone leave the property. And they literally left. And there are photographs from the 1920s of these camps, and they are literally abandoned with anything owned by the company left in place. The school desks in the schoolhouse, the ornaments and the piano, the organ in the church, mining equipment just lying around everywhere, the storehouse filled with old bottles and goods that were never sold. It's as though the people just disappeared.
So I want to thank Valley Water for supporting this virtual program, and Michael Cox, of course, for sharing his expert knowledge with us on the tour. I also want to thank Michael Hunt for helping me film Michael Cox. So as part of the reporting for our Valley Water grant, we have one last question for you. The question is to please rate your satisfaction with today's program on a scale from very satisfied to very unsatisfied. And we appreciate your feedback. And I want to let you know that this presentation in a few days and then all our other park tours that we've done in the past are available at BAO's webpage shown here, which is our homepage /videos. And that concludes our presentation. And if you want to contact us, you can go to our website, bayareaolderadults.org. Our email is here, info@bayareaolderadults.org. And then if you have any questions, you want to talk to us, it's 408-774-0593. Thank you.